Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1. This week's Chapter 1, we are going to be reading Gifts, Glamping, and Glocks. Deck the halls, fa la la, and all that stuff, Dottie swaggered Mabone from the bottom of the ladder she was holding on to, while I strung red lights along the top of the tiki hut as a child ran past us on a way back to his family's camper. Dottie! I grabbed the top rung when she wobbled below. She gave a quiet snort in the back of her throat as she deliberately shook the ladder. I don't know why on earth you decided not to have peace on earth, just like the Christmas season is supposed to be about, she retorted. The big old heart of yours puts all us in this predicament. What predicament? I carefully stapled the next piece of garland, making sure not to get my fingers in the way. We are doing good. Lester had a great idea, and if it helps Bets move on and feel good, we're going to do it. Bets Hager was one of us, a laundry club lady. We were a group of 5 friends who had so much in common, gossip mostly, but what better way to bring 5 nosy women together? Bets owned the local laundromat we used to get together and just talk about things. Again, gossip. Recently, her ex-husband, well, only ex because he'd been sent to prison and pardoned by the governor, had passed away. He'd left a notebook that was full of requests from his church congregation he'd not been able to fulfill, or things he left undone after he'd gone to prison, but was on borrowed time from the big man in the sky due to an illness he wasn't going to get pardoned from. If hosting an event that gives children a wonderful Christmas is something we can do to help Bets cross that off the list, then we're going to do it. I sucked in a deep breath. The cold Kentucky weather skittered to my nose and pricked my lungs. Slightly, I turned to get a view of the Happy Trails campground from this level and smiled. And it makes the campground really pretty. I loved how the Christmas trees on the dock of the lake was shining from the multicolored Christmas lights. Plus, there was all the mini trees that on the cute floating platforms in the lake made by Henry Bryant, the campground's handyman, and Beck Greer, the local teenager who worked with Henry for me. They had cleverly strung solar lights around each little tree and a mirror ball ornament, so during the day the balls reflected the sunlight as if the lights were on. And as soon as the sun started to descend behind the mountains in the Daniel Boone National Forest, the twinkly lights came on, giving a breathtaking and delightful addition to the decorations. Why on earth does Bet feels like she's the Jesus in his redemption? Dottie had long not been a big fan of Lester's pardon. Though he was a man of the cloth before he went to prison, Lester wasn't able to escape the sin that put him there. Everyone needs forgiving, I reminded her, though she squirmed uncomfortably below. How does that look? I decided to give up on trying to convince her the toy drive we were hosting was going to be a good thing for everyone in the community, not just to make Bets feel better. Truth of the matter, Bets was doing the good deeds only because she felt like if Lester had those marked off, he'd be let into the great eternal as they preached to the masses at the Normal Baptist Church. But for some reason, she'd taken on the sins that stuck him in prison as the lot in her life. At some point, we, the laundry club ladies and I, were going to have to help her see that Lester's shame wasn't her cross to bear. That would have to wait. We needed to get these Christmas decorations up and get the campground looking like the North Pole before the kids staying in Happy Trails campground for the week and the kids in the community got here to give Santa their wish list. After all, Christmas was just a few weeks away and Santa had to get those toys made. Have you seen Otis? I asked once after I got off the ladder to see how it looked for myself, even though Dottie said it looked fine. Fine to me meant it could be better. Fine to Dottie meant it was amazing. Otis Gullett had come to me after he'd heard we were looking for someone to play Santa for the Gifts and Glamping Christmas, the name of our event. He didn't have any experience, but he sure did have the build, if you know what I mean. He was over yonder last time I saw him, Dottie gestured to the recreational building, where we had some indoor games for the kids inside, and for the outside, we had gotten a few of the stand-up heaters to keep guests warm while Ty Randall and his brothers served the food they donated from the normal diner. When I said the entire town came out in order to make Gifts and Glamping Christmas a success, they went above and beyond. Not only had Happy Trails Campground filled up fast after we promoted it during the Thanksgiving holiday, but all the available rooms at the old train station motel, the Milkery's bed and breakfast, and the campgrounds within 20 miles of us filled up as well. Well, if you see him, please tell him the costume's in Bungalow 3 so he knows he can go in there and change, I told Dottie since she decided to take a smoke break, which meant she wasn't going to be doing any work until she had thoroughly enjoyed the lit cigarette in her mouth. If he passes by here, I'll tell him. Dottie made herself comfortable inside the tiki hut on a chair where we had for Santa. And don't forget to get your costume on. My jaw tightened into anticipation of her response as I walked away, but surprisingly, she did not respond. I hurried past the igloo Henry and Beck had made, nearly tripping over the 3 pigeons on ice skate. One by one, they fell like dominoes on the glass, disguised as a little pond in one of the many displays they'd set up around the campground. Dottie's under her breath snickers didn't go unnoticed. I didn't dare look back to see if her facial expressions or even hand gesture, if she made any, since I knew she felt like me falling over my own feet was warranted because I was asking her to dress like an elf for a couple of hours before we switched off. It was part of being an employee. We all pitched in where needed. Fifi, I called out to my little poodle. She was adorable in her reindeer antlers on her head and sweater to match. Fifi loved all of her sweaters and certainly didn't mind the antlers, as you'd think. I really did believe she understood how cute she was and liked all the attention she got from everyone she decided to give time to. Let's go on one more last walk. I talked to her as if she was a human child, and the way she always responded made me think she really did understand. We started right there in the tiki hut along the road and would make our way around the lake. It was the last time I'd be able to check on the guests of the campground who had pulled or driven in their own campers, or the guests who had come and rented one of my campers. They might need more things like wood for their fire pits or essential for living that I kept in the office. Happy Trails Campground was a full hookup campground that we kept open all seasons, which was rare in the middle of the Daniel Boone National Forest since our weather turned downright freezing. Most campgrounds around these parts shut down for the season right after Halloween. And now that our bungalows at the far end of the campground had heat, those really went fast for families who didn't want to rent a camper for the gatherings. Of course, the pinch tip area of the campground, located off the side of the bungalows in the wooded patch, was closed due to the nature of the type of camping. I didn't need anyone to get frostbite and die. That wouldn't be good for business. I love your gingerbread cutouts, I called to the first campsite we came to where the couple had their fifth wheel all leveled, set up, and ready to go. They had transformed the outside of their camper to look like a gingerbread house and used the icicle lights to appear like dripping icing. Let me know if you need anything. I waved goodbye to them and noticed Henry and Beck had already restocked new wood for the fire pits. The campground looked like the North Pole was in the middle of the Daniel Boone Forest and set up near the Arctic Ocean. The next lot was a vacant mini travel trailer that I owned. It was so cute, but only had enough room for one or a couple. It was rarely rented out during any sort of holiday. During the rest of the year, the little camper was booked, more times than not by someone who was looking to come for a little break in life, to reconnect their souls and just get away. We offered the perfect getaway here at Happy Trails Campground with all the gorgeous trails that wound through the park where you couldn't stop the soul's growth even if you tried. Plus, we offered many outdoor activities such as kayaking, canoeing, archery, hiking, and floating in the stream off of Red Fox Trail, as well as fishing and swimming in the lake right outside your camper. I ran my hand along the plastic chain link fence Henry had strung along the entire property of the campground. He brought me several photos he'd gotten online showing me how he wanted to make the event into truly what kids could imagine the North Pole would look like. And he had certainly had worked day and night since Thanksgiving to make it just so. It looks great. I walked up to the front of our small camper to see the finishing touches on the Santa's office display that Henry had made in the vacant space. Thanks. He handed the garland to Beck. They'd made the fun spread from the fallen leaves and old vines they gathered from the forest. It was Beck's idea after I showed him the photo. The fireplace was fake and used gas logs and a propane tank that was hidden in the back of the stone fireplace they'd erected. They'd made a huge chimney and decorated the front of it with a framed photo of Santa's family, and that included the elves, reindeer, and Mrs. Claus. There was a live Christmas tree next to the fireplace, all decorated with wrapped presents. Even Mrs. Claus had a rocking chair on the other side of the fireplace where she had her balls of knitting yarn in a basket and a nice blanket draped over the back. It was a perfect place to imagine her sitting there with the crackling fire while Santa sat behind his desk where there was a nice list with big check marks next to names, along with a big mug of coffee sitting next to it. It looks great, right? Beck's excitement made his young and ever so changing teenager's voice go a pitch higher. Wait until you see the fireworks. He reddened from embarrassment, but I acted like I'd not noticed. Honestly, I really do feel like I've just stepped into Santa's office, I said. I was amazed at how much Henry made his images in his head come to life. Thank you two so much for your hard work. I glanced around. Where is the picnic table? I wondered because those are stationary from the steel nails I'd had Henry drive into the concrete. Otis and I used his impact driver to take out the screws. Henry kept on working. Well, at least he did something, I moaned and pulled my phone out of my pocket and noticed we had had under 2 hours until the charity event started. And a sleigh. I pointed up to the tiki hut where he'd gotten a real sleigh from Buck, the owner of the Tough Nickel thrift shop. I had to take my mind off Otis and where he might be. From what I understood, Henry told Buck what he wanted, and Buck found it and brought it here, where the donated toys were going to be placed in during the event. It worked out perfect. Henry snorted and grinned so big. His large nose flattened along his face, and the smile grew and exposed his missing front two teeth. But the pride on him showed how much his efforts had come to life. If we get snow, I bet we can get Miss Ogden to bring a couple of her horses here to pull us. Beck had the look of a gleeful child during the holidays, and it warmed my soul to be part of his new memories. This was certainly going to be a Christmas to remember. I knew it. I felt it in my bones. That would be something if we got snow for that to happen, I said. I could picture Beck's request and Coke Ogden, the owner of not only the old train station motel, but the horseback riding experience she offered tourists for trail rides and really putzing about. Have you seen Otis? I asked Henry again. He really needs to start getting ready for the Santa debut. Probably stumbled into the woods drunk, Beck snorted. Beck, I gasped. Why would you say such a thing? Not that I was his mama, but he certainly didn't act like a gossipy woman that she was, even though I did hint around certain topics to Beck when I needed to know the answers to something because I knew his mama had her finger on the pulse of gossip, a various women's circle in Normal that I wasn't privy to. Beck pointed to Henry. Henry spat out. He is the town drunk now. Why would you say that? I'd not heard this, but then again, I wasn't around Otis Gullett much either. I heard the men talking about it over cards, and he's been hitting the bottle pretty good, and it's showing. Henry patted his gut. He let me know in his own way how Otis got the belly that I had reminded me of Santa when Otis asked if he could play the jolly old guy. I kept an eye on him today when he got here, and I couldn't help but notice he was nipping in his car. My brows pinched and I glanced over my shoulder near the storage unit located up front where I asked everyone to park so we could clear space for the locals' cars. I didn't see Otis in his car, but it didn't mean he wasn't in there. Well, if you see him, tell him to go to Bungalow 3 to put on his Santa outfit. I shook my head. The sound of gravel spitting up against an oncoming car had gotten my attention. Who on earth is that? I questioned, knowing that Hank Sharp, my fiance, was at the entrance of the campground and not letting anyone drive up. Come on, Fifi. I clicked my tongue, and when she rushed over, I picked her up. I didn't recognize the car, and I wasn't sure if it was a guest of one of our campers, but nonetheless, I hurried around the perimeter of the campground, giving all the guests a quick glance to see if they needed anything before I put Fifi in our camper for a little rest before she made her big debut next to Santa as a helper. As I came out of my camper, I realized the car had pulled up next to my lot into my little Ford. Ken? Magdalene? I greeted the Heidelmans. I was a bit shocked since he'd not let me know they were coming, even though they didn't really need to tell me since they'd rented a year-round spot in the campground near the back next to the bungalow. May, we have to talk about this lawsuit. Ken was my insurance man and had practically ruined my Thanksgiving. After he gave me the news, I was being sued by a camper who'd stayed here the first year I had opened due to a spider bite they'd gotten. Ken, I said flatly, take a look around. I drew my arms out in front of me. We are in the middle of a forest. There are bugs, spiders, snakes, and even bears here. Those people took the kayak class with Alan Dieters. They stopped along the stream, hiked, ate, and just relaxed on the bank. They could have been bitten anywhere. They have photos, May. They have photos of a spider in that camper. He pointed across the lake to Santa's office and the empty little travel trailer. I don't have time for this. I have got to find my Santa. I bent down and looked into the closed passenger side window where Magdalene was sitting. Hi, Magdalene. You're going to love the food today. All campfire food. She rolled down her window. I hope you've got some spiked cider. Ken needs it. He's been worried sick about this lawsuit, and I've told him everything you thought. Her lips pinched. He's driving me nuts. We really need to talk, May. Ken was right on the back of my heels. We will, I called as I hurried toward the front of the campground where I needed to see if Otis was in his car. But Ken didn't stop. He kept following. Ken, you have to let me get through today, and we will sit down in the morning. I laughed when I saw Magdalene crawl into the driver's seat and throw the car into drive and proceeded down to their camper. For now, I have to find Otis, or we won't have a Santa. I stalked over to Otis's car, and sure enough, there he was, lying down in the seat with a silver flask resting on his chest. I gave a few hard knocks on the window. What? Otis jerked up, his eyes closed. Otis Scarlett, how on earth are you going to play Santa drunk? My insides were as hot as the flaming fire pits around the campground. My nose flares as it sucked the cold air in and the condensation puffed out. May, can we now talk about the lawsuit? Ken interrupted my anger at Otis and put the spotlight on himself. I'll make you a deal, Ken, I sighed and thought. I need a Santa, and you need my ear. The only way I can honestly get my head wrapped around the lawsuit today is to relax and de-stress. So, a wonderful event can take place so every child has a wonderful Christmas experience. What are you saying? He asked. He was taking the cookies just like Santa did at each house he visited while delivering his presents. I need a Santa. You need my ear, I shrugged and watched Dottie walk up. She leaned to look in the window at Otis, and she lingered a while. You scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours, I told Ken in no uncertain terms that if he filled in for Otis and Santa, I'd give him all the time he needed to discuss the lawsuit. Tomorrow. Fine. Ken gave me a hard look. You'll find the Santa suit in bungalow number 3. Be ready in an hour, I smiled as he stormed back down the campground towards his camper. There. Now I don't have to worry about Otis anymore, I said, expecting Dottie to say something, but it was silence. Dottie? I turned my attention from Ken back to Dottie. She hummed, still looking into Otis's car window. He's as useless as a milk bucket under a bull. Little did I know, Dottie had hit the nail on the head about Otis. And soon I was about to find out just how useless he was. Chapter 1, Gifts, Glamps, and Glocks.